On a frozen ridge where even the wind seemed too tired to howl, a mountain man named Elias stumbled upon something he could never forget. Beneath a sheet of glassy ice half buried by snow lay the body of a wild horse. Its mane was tangled with frost, its eyes wide and clouded as if frozen mid-gallop. At first Elias thought it was already gone, another casualty of winter's cruelty. But then the ice cracked and he heard it, the faint, desperate sound of breath. In that moment the silence of the mountain broke, and so did his heart. What followed was a fight not just to save an animal, but to remind himself why life was still worth holding on to. If this story moves you, please subscribe, share it, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Snow can turn a road into a riddle. That morning it turned the high trail above Willowbreak into silence. No bird calls, no runoff, just the whisper of Elias's breath fogging his scarf. He hiked because that's what he did when the house felt too small for grief. The winter after his wife Mara passed, the walls learned all his footsteps. The mountain did not ask him to be brave. It asked him to keep moving. Halfway to the ridge, the wind fell away and he heard a sound that didn't belong to weather, a brittle, hollow tapping, like a spoon against glass. He followed it across a crust of wind-blown snow to a narrow basin, where the creek spread thin and froze solid. At the center lay a shape the size of a small elk, dark against the ice. He thought it was a log at first, then the log quivered. Elias slid down on his hip, boots carving a path. Up close he saw the truth. A wild horse, chestnut under the hoarfrost, one flank sealed into the ice as if the creek had tried to keep it. Its nostrils fluttered. The tapping was its hoof striking the frozen shell. "Easy," he said, voice low, hands open, like he used to speak to skittish colts at his father's place. No one answered him now but the mountain and this horse. There are rules when you find a wild one. Don't touch unless you must. Don't corner it. Always make space for fear. He circled wide, reading the situation. The ice was clenched to the animal from shoulder to ribs. The creek ran beneath, slow asleep. The horse's other foreleg pawed, slipping. If it thrashed, the ice would break wrong and pull it under. He shrugged off his pack and took stock. A small camp shovel, paracord, a folding saw, 2 wool blankets rolled tight, a thermos that had kept him alive on harder days. He moved in until the horse's eye held his reflection. It was the look of panic strapped to hope. "I can't do this alone," he said, and felt the ache of the words. He thought of Mara's hand on his back on mornings he wanted to stay in bed. He breathed in through his nose, out slow. "Okay, we'll go slow." He cut shallow channels in the ice with the saw, inches from the horse's skin, each stroke a prayer he wouldn't slip. He shoveled slush clear with the little spade. When the blade skittered, the horse flinched. He stopped and waited until its breath steadied. Minutes thickened into pieces of an hour. The cold bit through his gloves. "Stay," he murmured. Absurd command for something that had no choice. He laid one blanket over its exposed shoulder, tucking the edges against the wind. He poured a cap of warm water from the thermos and let the horse smell it. It lipped the rim, then drank, trembling. Elias knotted paracord into a loose breast collar, not to tie but to give direction without pain. He tested the ice with his weight. It held, complaining in soft pops. "On 3, he said, as much to himself as to the horse. 1. He saw Mara smiling, flour on her cheek. 2. He felt the empty chair at the table. 3. He leaned, heaved, guiding as the horse tried to rise. The ice cracked like a gunshot. The basin rang. Water surged up around his boots. The horse lurched, chest free, forelegs scrambling. For a heartbeat, they both hung between falling and freedom. "Easy," Elias breathed, anchoring the rope, legs braced, taking the pull into his shoulders. The horse found purchase, slid forward, and collapsed onto the bank in a sprawl of steam and mud. Elias fell back, laughing once, a shocked, wet sound that broke into a sob he hadn't expected. The horse lay shaking, alive. So was he. The horse's sides heaved, ribs fluttering like bellows. Steam lifted off its coat, mixing with the mist crawling across the basin. Elias crouched a few feet away, giving space. Wild ones didn't thank you. They measured you. The chestnut tried to rise, legs folding beneath it like reeds. Elias raised a palm. "Not yet," he said softly. His voice sounded strange, rusty, as if he'd forgotten how to comfort anything living. He unpacked the second blanket and laid it across the animal's back. The fabric darkened with melting frost. His gloves came away soaked, fingers stinging. He stripped them off and rubbed the horse's neck with bare hands, letting the heat from his own skin seep into its trembling hide. The mane was coarse, tangled with shards of ice. "Easy, boy. You're not alone." The words surprised him. How much they were meant for himself. Juniper wasn't there to bark. No wife to scold him for freezing his knuckles raw. Just him and the horse. That was enough. He pulled jerky from his pocket, held it out. The horse sniffed, lips quivering, but didn't take it. Hunger was there, though, tucked behind fear. Elias tucked the strip under the blanket where it could find it later. The sky grayed as snow began again, soft flakes drifting like ashes. He had to move the animal before it froze all over again. But where? The cabin was 3 miles downhill, a hard walk with his own 2 feet. Impossible with half-frozen muscle beside him. Still, he couldn't leave it. He found his voice again. "Come on, then. Let's try together." He loosened the paracord and coaxed the horse to stand. Its legs wobbled, slid, then caught. It towered over him now, ears flicking, eyes wide. For a moment it looked ready to bolt into the timber, leave him kneeling in slush. Then the rope twitched in his hand. Not a pull, not a fight, but something closer to permission. They moved slow, step by step, Elias breaking trail through the drifts. The horse followed, staggering at first, then steadier. The sound of hooves against snow was strange comfort, a rhythm his loneliness had forgotten. Halfway down, the trail narrowed between pines heavy with snow. The horse balked, sides quivering. Elias rested his forehead against its shoulder, breath fogging in the winter air. "I know, feels too tight. Feels like you can't make it through. But you can." One step. It snorted, stamped, then followed. When the cabin finally came into view, a sagging roof, smoke-dark chimney, porch buried knee-deep, Elias's chest cracked with a relief he hadn't felt since Mara was alive. He'd always cursed the place for being too small, too lonely. Now, leading this creature through his gate, it felt like shelter again. He cleared a space in the barn, shaking straw loose from old bales. The horse folded to its knees the instant he let it inside, sides heaving, steam rising. Elias knelt beside it. He rubbed warmth into its skin until his arms ached. For hours he worked. He dried its legs, fed it small handfuls of hay, coaxed it to drink from a bucket. Slowly its shivering eased. Slowly its eyes softened. That night Elias sat against the stall wall, lantern light trembling. The horse dozed, breath heavy but steady. He watched it with something like awe. Saving it hadn't solved his grief, hadn't resurrected Mara, but it had reminded him his hands still knew how to fight for life. He whispered, voice breaking, "Guess we're both still here, huh?" The horse flicked an ear, half asleep. Snow fell outside, muffling the mountain. Elias woke stiff and cold, straw clinging to his jacket. The lantern had burned out, leaving only a slice of dawn seeping through the barn's slats. For a moment he forgot where he was, why his back ached, why his palms were raw. Then the horse shifted, snorted, and the memory rushed in like floodwater. It had survived the night. That was the first miracle. Elias stretched, bones creaking, and set about checking on his guest. He brushed the chestnut's flank with his hands, fingers reading every tremor. The skin was warm now, no longer like ice. He found the jerky strip still tucked under the blanket, chewed but unfinished. "You tried," he murmured. "That's a start." He fetched a bucket of water and another small flake of hay. The horse drank slow, lips breaking the surface with delicate gulps. Watching it reminded Elias of tending his father's horses as a boy. How Mara once teased him for knowing more about animals than people. The memory stung, but it carried warmth too. By midday, the snow outside stopped, leaving the world hushed. Elias led the horse out of the stall, cautious of its legs. It staggered, nearly collapsed, then steadied. Together they walked the length of the barnyard, boots and hooves crunching in rhythm. Elias found himself speaking without thinking, words spilling like thawed creek water. "You're tougher than you look. Can't say the same for me. Lost more than I thought I could carry. Then you show up, stuck in a block of ice, asking me to remember how to fight." The horse didn't answer, of course, but its ears flicked as though listening. That afternoon, Elias rummaged through the old tack chest. He found a rope halter frayed at the edges, brushed the dust from it. He didn't plan to break the animal. Wild horses belonged to the mountain. But he wanted to offer guidance, not chains. When he slipped the halter over its head, the horse stood calm, unresisting. That trust hit him harder than a kick to the ribs. By evening, he had given the horse a name, Ash, for the way frost had powdered its coat like burned wood. Names mattered. Names made something part of you. He said it aloud, testing the sound. Ash! The horse flicked its tail. It was enough. That night, Elias sat by the stove inside his cabin, Juniper's old collar still hanging by the door where Mara left it. The house had been a tomb for his silence, each board echoing his loneliness. Now, with Ash shifting in the barn, the silence felt different, not emptiness, but possibility. Sleep was shallow. He dreamed of Mara's laugh, clear and bright, and woke with tears stiff on his cheeks. He pulled on his boots and hurried to the barn like a man late for prayer. Ash greeted him with a soft nicker, steam curling from its nostrils. Elias leaned his forehead against the horses, breath mingling in the cold. "We're both still here," he whispered. And that means something. Over the next days, their rhythm formed. He fed small, steady meals, walked the horse daily, rubbed circulation into legs that had nearly frozen solid. Slowly, Ash regained strength. Its coat gleamed under the brush, eyes grew less haunted. Each step forward was a balm for Elias, too. His grief didn't vanish, but it shifted, softened by purpose. And yet part of him knew the mountain hadn't given Ash to him to keep. Wild things weren't meant to be caged. The thought tightened in his chest even as he ran his hand through the thick mane. The question pressed against him like the cold outside. When Ash was strong enough, would he let him go? The snow melted in slow degrees, dripping from the eaves, loosening the ice that had clenched the mountain all winter. With each passing day, Ash grew stronger, his ribs less sharp beneath his coat, his steps steadier. He would nicker softly when Elias entered the barn, and the sound dug into Elias's chest, both healing and hurting at once. Elias brushed him every morning, long strokes that lifted winter's dust, the rhythm like prayer. He spoke while he worked, memories he hadn't said aloud in years, about Mara's garden that used to bloom even in thin soil, about the way she hummed when kneading bread. Ash listened, ears flicking, body still. Grief, Elias realized, was lighter when shared, even with a creature who would never answer. One evening, Elias led Ash outside. The air was brittle with cold, the last snow still patching the ground like torn blankets. Ash's breath plumed in the dusk, and for the first time he tugged the lead rope forward, asking to move beyond the barnyard. Elias hesitated, fear tightening his stomach. What if Ash ran, legs still not ready? What if he vanished into the tree line? A ghost Elias would never catch. But the look in Ash's eyes wasn't wild. It was yearning. "All right," Elias whispered. "Let's see." He walked beside him, boots crunching on the packed trail, the rope slack between them. Ash stumbled once, recovered, then found his rhythm. They went as far as the ridge, where the land opened to sky. The valley below was glazed with moonlight, and the frozen creek glimmered like a silver scar. Elias stopped there, chest tight. He remembered finding Ash beneath the ice, remembered the sound of hooves tapping in desperation. "You should have died that day," he said quietly. "Truth is, so should I, but here we are." Ash lowered his head, nuzzling the sleeve of Elias's coat, and the man's throat closed. He leaned into the warmth, eyes burning. "Thank you," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he meant Mara or the horse or the mountain itself. Back at the cabin, Elias couldn't sleep. The question gnawed at him. When Ash is whole again, can I let him go? He'd lost too much already. He wasn't sure his heart could bear losing again, even if keeping Ash meant stealing his freedom. Days passed. Ash grew restless, pawing at the barn door, ears pricking at every distant whinny from the wild herds above the timberline. Elias saw it in him, the call of open country, the memory of Gallop. To deny it would be selfish, yet the thought of the barn empty again hollowed Elias like a wound. One night he sat by the stall, lantern low, hands folded. "You'll leave me," he said softly. Ash flicked an ear. "And I'll let you." "Because that's love, isn't it? Not keeping, but giving back." His voice cracked on the words. He pressed his forehead to the horse's warm neck, shoulders shaking. For the first time since Mara's passing, he let himself cry, not the strangled sobs of a man alone, but open, breaking, healing. Ash stood still, steady as an altar, and Elias wept into his mane. By dawn he knew what he had to do. He would open the gate when Ash was ready. He would stand at the fence, watch him vanish into the timber and bear the silence that followed. He would let go, not because he wanted to, but because love sometimes demanded it. The decision carved him hollow. But in that hollow space, something like hope, the thaw quickened. Snow retreated into shadows, Creeks sang louder, and the air softened with hints of pine and damp soil. Spring was prying open the mountain's fist. Ash grew restless with it. His hooves struck the barn floor, his eyes fixed on every sliver of daylight spilling through the cracks. Freedom pulsed in him, undeniable. Elias saw it and felt the ache of it like a bruise. Each day he brushed Ash, fed him, walked him farther down the trail. Each day the horse leaned less on him, carried more of himself. Each day Elias counted down to the moment he would lose him. One morning Elias saddled no gear, carried no rope. He only opened the stall and let Ash follow him to the pasture gate. The valley spread wide, greening at its edges. Above, a hawk turned slow circles. Ash lifted his head, ears forward, nostrils flaring at the scent of the open world. Elias's throat closed. He rested a hand on the horse's neck, feeling the warmth, the life that had almost been stolen by ice. He whispered, "You don't owe me." "You never did." He pulled the latch. The gate swung open with a tired creak. For a long moment, Ash didn't move. He looked at Elias at the open valley, then back again. His ears flicked, tail swished, muscles quivered with choice. Elias swallowed hard. "Go," he said, voice breaking. "Go where you belong." Ash snorted, pawed once at the ground, then bolted. The sight was thunder, hooves pounding, mane flying, the raw poetry of freedom. He cut across the pasture, leapt the far fence with power Elias hadn't seen in months, and vanished into the timberline. Silence swallowed the yard. Elias's hands shook, empty without the lead rope. He pressed his palms to his face, and for the first time since Mara's death he wept openly. Deep, unashamed sobs that bent him at the waist. The barn, the cabin, the mountain, all of it echoed with his grief. But beneath the grief was pride. Ash had lived. Ash had returned to the wild. The days after were hollow. Elias walked the trails, half hoping to see a flash of chestnut through the trees, always finding only shadows. Nights were worse, quiet pressing against his ribs, barn empty as a tomb. He wondered if he'd made a mistake, if letting go had been just another way of losing. But then one evening, as dusk pooled in the valley, he heard it. Hooves faint and quick circling the pasture. He stepped outside. In the half-light, Ash stood at the far fence, mane tangled with burrs, chest rising strong. He hadn't come back to stay. Elias could see that. But he had come back to look, to linger, to acknowledge. Elias stood still, not daring to move closer. Ash snorted, stamped, and then wheeled away, vanishing once more into the timber. The visit was brief, but it was enough. Elias felt something shift in his chest, grief making space for wonder. He realized then that letting go didn't mean losing. It meant trusting the barn to survive beyond fences, beyond control. It meant loving enough to free. That night he sat by the fire, hands folded, heart quieter. The ache remained, loss always did, but threaded through it now was a thread of joy, fragile but real. He had saved a life, and in saving it he had saved a piece of himself. Tomorrow, he thought, he would walk the ridge again, not to escape grief this time, but to meet it where it lived, in the silence, in the wild, in the gallop of a horse that refused to die. The mountain was waking in full. Snowmelt rushed down gullies, flooding the creeks that only weeks earlier had been frozen solid. Shoots of green poked stubbornly through the soil. The air smelled different, alive like rain on warm stone. Elias felt it in his bones too, though he carried it differently than the land. Renewal for him was slower, harder. He split logs one morning, each crack of the axe ringing sharp. When he caught sight of movement at the timber's edge, Ash. The horse stood half hidden between the pines, chestnut coat catching in the sunlight. Elias froze, axe hovering mid-swing. Ash didn't move closer, didn't call out, but he was there, watching. Elias lowered the axe gently, not wanting to break the fragile moment. "You found your herd?" he asked, voice soft, though no answer came. Ash flicked an ear, then lifted his head higher as though pointing. From deeper in the woods came the faint whinny of other horses, wild, free. Relief cut through Elias, bittersweet. Ash wasn't alone anymore. The horse lingered a few breaths longer, then wheeled and disappeared into the trees. Elias stood with his hands trembling. That brief visit fed something inside him he hadn't known was starving. He didn't need to own Ash, didn't need to tether him to the cabin. Just knowing he lived, strong and free, was enough. Days slipped into weeks. Elias found rhythm again, chores giving shape to hours. Yet grief still haunted the corners. Nights by the fire he still reached across the empty chair. Mornings, he still stirred too much coffee for one. Ash hadn't cured the ache, but he had changed it. Grief no longer drowned him. It walked beside him, quieter. One afternoon, Elias hiked to the ridge where he had first found the horse trapped in ice. The basin was thawed now, creek water rushing fast and clear. He knelt at its edge, ran his hand through the current and let memory flood him. The tapping hoof, the desperate eye, the sound of ice cracking under weight. He whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't just for Ash, it was for Mara too. For all the reasons he hadn't given up, even when the silence begged him to. That evening, returning to the cabin, he heard hooves again. Not frantic, not weak, confident, playful. Ash appeared with 2 other horses, grazing near the pasture. Their coats shone in the last light, manes tangled with freedom. Elias leaned against the fence, watching. Ash lifted his head, eyes meeting his for one suspended moment. Elias didn't move closer. He didn't call out. He simply stood still, letting the horse decide. Ash stepped forward once, closing the distance, then stopped as if to say, "I remember. I'm all right." The moment broke when the herd bolted, hooves thundering into the twilight. Elias's throat burned, but the tears that came were softer now, not weighted with despair. They were gratitude, pure and sharp. Later, by the fire, Elias pulled out Mara's old journal, the one she'd left half filled with recipes and pressed flowers. He added a new page. His handwriting shook, but the words steadied him. Today, Ash came back. He was not mine to keep, but he was mine to save. Saving him saved me. Grief remains, but so does life. Both can live together. He closed the journal, laid it gently on the table, and felt something in his chest unclench. The cabin no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a place where stories could continue, even broken ones. Elias leaned back, listening to the mountain's night song. For the first time, he believed Mara would. Spring ripened into early summer. The valley shed its white shroud and wore green again, grass stretching high enough to brush Elias's knees when he walked the fields. The cabin still leaned with age, the barn still smelled of dust and hay, but to Elias the place no longer felt abandoned. Life pulsed in and around it, in the chirping birds, in the rush of the creek, and most of all in the memory of a horse that had refused to die. Ash visited less often as the herds climbed higher, chasing fresh grays. Sometimes Elias would catch sight of him at dawn, a chestnut silhouette on the ridge, mane rippling in the wind. Each time his heart would lurch with the same mixture of pride and ache. He had let Ash go, but Ash had not vanished. He lingered, a living reminder that survival could be shared. One evening, Elias carried his chair outside to watch the sunset. The horizon burned orange and rose. Clouds stretched thin like brushstrokes. He sipped coffee gone cold, the silence settling into him like an old friend. Grief sat there too, Mara's absence still carved into every corner of his life. But it no longer strangled him. It simply lived beside him, softer now, less cruel. As the light faded, the familiar sound of hooves stirred the dusk. Elias leaned forward, breath caught. Ash trotted into view from the tree line, stronger than ever, his coat gleaming. 2 younger horses followed close, nipping at his heels. Ash halted near the pasture, tossing his head with a confidence Elias hadn't seen in the broken creature he once pulled from the ice. Elias rose slowly, not wanting to startle them. He rested his arms on the fence and just watched. Ash stepped closer, closing half the distance, eyes steady. For a long, still moment, man and horse regarded each other. No ropes, no chains, nothing but trust built in silence and hardship. Elias whispered, "You made it." His voice cracked. "We both did." Ash snorted softly, then turned, herding the younger horses back toward the trees. They vanished into the shadows, leaving only the echo of hooves fading up the ridge. Elias stood at the fence long after, chest tight, eyes wet. That night he wrote again in Mara's journal, "Freedom is love's proof. I thought letting go meant losing, but today I saw Ash lead others, alive because he was given back to the wild. Maybe grief is the same. You don't escape it. You carry it, and it teaches you how to let others live." He closed the book, slid it onto the shelf, and felt peace settle like a blanket. Weeks later, when townsfolk came by with news or supplies, they asked about the horse he'd saved. Elias told the story in pieces, the ice, the fight, the long nights in the barn. His voice always caught at the same part, the moment he opened the gate. More than once it left his listeners in tears. "I didn't rescue him," Elias always finished. "We rescued each other. The cabin, once too quiet, now felt like home. Not because it was filled with laughter again. Mara was still gone, silence still heavy. But because Elias had learned that silence didn't have to mean emptiness. It could mean memory, resilience, love."